Alrighty, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar here. Thanks for waiting those extra couple minutes. We're about ready to get started here. So today, we're so happy to be co-hosting with Guesty here and talking about pricing strategies for the midterm and flexible inventory model. So I know this has been a big trend going on in the vacation rental industry recently. A lot of booking trends have definitely shifted towards midterm in lots of market. So we'll be talking about both the operational side of things from the PMS perspective and the pricing and revenue management side of things, really talking about what you can be doing with your strategies to optimize for these types of bookings here. So with me today, I have Amiad Soto, the co-founder of Guesty, and Anurag Verma, the co-founder of PriceLabs here. So two very knowledgeable resources. They'll both be talking, giving their own slides here about their own sides of operations, since it really does take both the strategy aspect and also making sure that you're managing everything on the owner side of things to have a smooth process here. But a couple housekeeping items before we get started. We'll leave most questions to the end, but if something comes up as we're going through the presentations here, do ask questions using that Q&A module. So please refrain from using the chat. That just helps us track everything in one place and lets us address those questions a little quicker here. And if you can't hear us right now, make sure to click that join audio button. That'll make sure you get your audio coming through your speakers to make things a little clearer here. And then finally, a recording of the webinar will be sent out a little later today. So give us a few hours after the webinar is over and you'll see an email pop up in your inbox. So if you do have to take off a little early, no worries at all here. And before I hand it off to Amiad here, I thought it would be good to go over a few definitions here. We're going to be throwing these terms around quite a bit during the webinar. So just to make sure everyone's on the same page, when we're talking about extended stays, we're typically talking about any bookings that are longer than 28 days. So everything shorter than 28 days, that's your typical short-term rental here. But extended stays, that's typically 1 to 3 months when we're talking about booking here. Same goes for midterm rentals, midterm stays, extended stays, pretty similar. Those are, of course, 1 to 12 months, whereas long-term stays, those would be those longer leases, 12 plus months here. Then when we talk about flexible inventory, that's something that came in the Q&A before the webinar here. We're really talking about incorporating those longer stays with shorter stays in your calendar to kind of have that hybrid approach. So you're catering to those longer term travelers, filling in those gaps of shorter stays, so really being flexible with your inventory, making sure everything's always available to book here. But without further ado, let's have Amiad take it away here, tell us what Guesty's up to here on Guesty's side, and talk a bit more about the midterm rental craze we've been seeing here recently. So I'll stop sharing and hand you the reins here.
I hope you can see my screen and hear me well. Perfect. So hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here with you all today. We'll be looking at how property management companies can diversify their business models by incorporating extended stays into their existing portfolios and why they should, right? So for anyone who don't know me, my name is Amiad Soto, and I'm the co-founder and CEO at short-term rental property management platform called Guesty. So I'll jump right in and feel free to send your questions in the Q&A and we'll address them as I finish. So first, it's safe to say that today there is no one-size-fits-all in travel. All parties involved, specifically hosts and travelers, are craving flexibility. Traveler preferences vary from trip to trip based on the purpose of the trip itself, may it be business or family gateway, who they're traveling with, may it be fiance or kids, as well as the length of stay. Is it a weekend staycation or a 3-month work from home stay? This couldn't be more true as we navigate this pandemic. Here you can see global booking patterns we have pulled from our own data here at Guesty. In short, last-minute bookings are trending. Majority of new reservations globally are made up to 7 days in advance before the booking. The second largest number of new reservations made are for those happening within the next 30 days. And guests are also booking longer stays. There's been a global shift to extended stays of 14 plus and even 30 plus days. We're also seeing the flexibility travelers of today crave as they take advantage of relaxed cancellation policies. And our reservation data shows that cancellations have doubled year to date, and we are seeing a big increase in cancellations as guests get closer to check-in. Obviously, that was true for the first few months of the pandemic, but still now, it's a little bit more than it used to, but a lot better than it was before COVID-19 impact. Now, due to fluctuating and the widespread travel restrictions, it's not surprised that new travel personas have emerged in light of COVID-19. These include, of course, displaced and stranded travelers, digital nomads who value connectivity and great outdoors, city scrapers heading to rural areas to escape condensed cities, quarantiners, as we call them, as well as healthcare workers, families who need outdoor space for kids to roam, business workers who need a nice work from home environment. And lastly, there are also people that are looking for places for their entire family to get together where it's not possible within their own environment. These guests are driving new patterns in the short-term rental space, including those on the screen. So far, we've seen hosts show their versatility and agility to adapt to the new normal, whether that be by shifting their marketing strategies toward being a safe haven to isolate in, offering more relaxed cancellation policies, and more. Today, I'm going to be focusing on incorporating flexibility inventory and midterm stays into your existing portfolio. With the limitations that we've seen on international travel over the past couple of months, coupled with the flexibility that many guests are now seeking, short-term rental companies are looking for ways to mitigate their losses, increase their occupancy, and ensure business stability. In fact, when Guesty surveyed nearly 400 property management companies on what actions they're taking and in what directions they're pivoting in light of COVID-19, and almost 40% of them said that they are diversifying their businesses models to include extended stays, those of 28 days or more, in order to attract more bookings and try to generate revenues whenever and however they can. First of all, what are extended stays? And as my friend here mentioned and gave the definition, I'm also gonna dive into how we see it. How do we classify them versus short-term stays? And it's really easy. If it's more than 4 weeks, it's what we call extended stay. And that's how you will see booking channels classify them as well. The extended stay that we are talking about today can be anywhere from 28 days to periods of multiple months. Typically, anything longer than that is going to be considered more of a longer term lease. Extended stays usually come with a reduced daily rate, but offer the security of occupancy for a longer period of time, which is ideal in time of uncertainty. So where is it the demand for midterm rental stay come from? Some of the more common scenarios we are seeing include citywide lockdowns that have caused many travelers to look for accommodations for an extended period of time. Australia's, for example, second largest city, Melbourne, just issued a 6-week citywide lockdown, closing non-essential businesses and requiring hundreds of thousands of people to stay indoors. Any traveler there before the lockdown was imposed will likely need somewhere to hunker down until it's over. Of course, there's also domestic travelers, such as digital nomads searching for a functional and comfortable work from home environment, or families who want some more outdoor space this summer, are booking longer stays to escape condensed cities for the summer. Private rentals are quickly becoming the popular choice over crowded hotels, as more travelers are looking for isolated and contact-free accommodations for their extended stay, which is driving more bookings and higher occupancy rates. So as you can see, there are many reasons that explain the heightened need for mid-stays. For short-term property management companies, extended stay also create a unique opportunity to fill rentals during off-seasons and other low occupancy times. Even after coronavirus has become a distant memory, one of the first benefits is the potential for assured rental income. While short-term rentals usually yield more income on a nightly basis, it makes sense to identify your low season and then potentially incorporate extended stays into your calendar. It's going to be different for every business, depends on its location, business model, and the amenities it offers. and you're going to have to find the balance that fits each and every one of your properties. Another benefit is having reduced check-ins, cleanings, and management times. For short-term rental, guests expect prompt responses from property managers and hosts. Even if you have great guests, you still have to handle basic communication and scheduling around the clock for those renting out your listing short-term. More turnovers means far more time communicating with guests and far more operational needs. And by the way, when you offer extra cleanings, you can now charge extra for them as an operational upsell. With more and more guests seeking extended stays, we're seeing an uptick in flexible inventory of short, mid, and long-term rentals, as well as online travel agencies updating their policies to meet these new demands. Airbnb, for example, launched its monthly stay feature in April in response to seeing a 20% surge in longer-term bookings compared to this time last year, as 80% of hosts are accepting longer stays, and 50% of them are offering guests discounts on them. In order to qualify as a monthly stay on Airbnb, your listing must be 28 days or more compliant, offer length of stay discount, and must provide the necessary amenities like Wi-Fi, kitchen, essentials, laundry, etc. Not only are these travelers booking longer stays, but they are looking to do so close to home. VRBO reported a 15% increase in demand for vacation homes within 500 miles from where a traveler lived compared to last year. In response to the desire for domestic travel, VRBO also launched their Staycations experience, an initiative that calls attention to rentals that are close to potential guests and can provide that home away from home experience for a longer time. Obviously, we will share with you these slides if you need, so you can click these links that I have here as well and learn more about this. As a response to the increased demand for longer stays, hosts should be taking advantage of the new promotions many OTAs are now offering. Besides Airbnb and VRBO, Agoda recently introduced longer stays promotions as well. Travelers can now book stays up to 90 nights through Agoda with 40% off their bookings, which encourages travelers to book rentals for an extended period of time and increases your occupancy rates. Hosts can also try listing on niche websites that specialize in longer stays, giving them more visibility among potential guests. Rentals United, for example, offers potential to connect with a handful of midterm-oriented booking platforms, all targeting the different type of travelers of today. Aside from relying on booking channels, you can also promote your extended stay listing by building your own direct booking website. With a site of your own, you can accept commission-free bookings, so you can get to pocket all of the profit. And since the site is yours, you have flexibility to do what you choose with it, including showcasing your brand and emphasizing specific listings to which you'd like to draw bookings to. By the way, friendly FYI here that Guesty offers a free branded websites builder for all of our users. So if you want to rent out your properties for midterm or extended stays, take note of the following best practices. Set clear expectations. When you're talking to potential renters, be upfront about the expectations and availability. If you know you have upcoming bookings, let them know. That way, they won't expect to be able to extend their stay afterwards. If you're hoping to get back into short-term rentals as soon as possible, this should be something that's made clear to your tenants. Next, make the most out of your technology. Keep track of all your bookings from various channels, both short and extended, using a centralized and single multi-calendar tool. That way, you have the best oversight of your portfolio and what's going on in your business. Or take advantage of dynamic pricing tools, such as the one PriceLabs here offers. Next, think long-term. Ask yourself, what would you expect from a property that you plan on staying in for more than a month? One example that comes to mind right away is having access to laundry. For extended stays, something like laundry access is far more important than for short-term stays. Put an emphasis on marketing. Promote these listings and these stays locally, since many of your guests will likely be domestic. Change your listing descriptions to showcase that your properties are available for short-term and midterm reservations. Market discounts rates for monthly stays, and let your guests know that you offer competitive discounts for extended reservations, including, by the way, return guests. So you can make sure that every guest that checks out know that for your next reservation, they get also a discount coupon. Lastly, know your market. You need to know your rental market to figure out the ideal mix of short-term and extended stays. By optimizing this mix, you will maximize your bottom line. So how can property management companies adapt and manage flexible inventory, support extended stays, provide top-notch guest experience, and more? And the lucky news here is that Guesty is here to help. So for those of you who might be less familiar with Guesty and what we do, Guesty was built with the understanding that property managers and property management companies have a ton of tasks to accomplish on a daily basis. Whether it be staff management, issuing reports to homeowners, or handling guests' check-ins and checkouts, our software provides solutions that help them save valuable time so they can focus on what matters most, which is growing their business to success. Our platform is obviously integrated with the World Top OTAs, as well as third-party solutions that help you succeed, all of which you can find in our marketplace, from dynamic pricing tool to noise monitoring technology to keyless entry systems. This ecosystem of vetted and approved tech tools share the same goal, making property management easier, especially in the days of pandemic and touchless experiences. So Guesty now supports flexible inventory management, so hosts can maximize their appeal to various types of guests. When offering extended stays, we advise our users to automate communication exclusively for midterm listings, optimize your pricing strategy using a yield management tool like PriceLabs, and even offer rental agreements for guests to sign digitally to make sure rentals are protected. You can find more helpful resources and guidance and diversifying your business model to new travel norms and patterns on our Guesty COVID-19 Info Center, which is a resource point for property management companies, not just our users, but the community as a whole as well. Within the Info Center, you will find tips, actionable advice, guides, articles by industry thought leaders, tech solutions, free weekly virtual events, and more to help you stay on top of the global health crisis. One of the resources you'll find is the industry report I mentioned before. You can find the full report on our COVID-19 Info Center, but I just wanted to highlight a few more insights here. For example, respondents reported that 2 strategies they found the most helpful in maintaining business stability were implementing a flexible cancellation policy, 22% actually said that, and 18% said that reduced daily rates helped them tremendously. Hosts have also caught on to the fact that guests are wary of human interaction and the risk of exposure. 60% of respondents reported following more stringent cleaning protocols, and the vast majority of respondents were optimistic about the future. 70% believed the short-term rentals are better positioned to recover than hotels post-COVID-19. And I want to end on a positive note here. Our data points to even more optimism in the future. Travelers are booking again in major US cities. Increased bookings in these metropolitan cities, originally avoided by many of travel people looking in short-term rentals in these times, with many folks even giving up their apartments to escape, are now back on the map for the first time since March this year, likely for a multitude of reasons. There's a pent-up demand for travel, and people simply need a change of scenery, even within the same own urban cities, like staycations. People on the outskirts of cities or nearby want to safely enjoy reopened restaurants and sites, for example, long weekend stays. And travelers are able to take advantage of low prices in cities that never before could be possible. So month over month, we're also seeing increase in global bookings. In July, for example, we saw a 10% increase comparing to June. And slowly but surely, we're seeing recovery in all of our markets around the world. In conclusion, although COVID-19 has changed how we travel, we are seeing the ability of property management companies worldwide to quickly pivot to meet the changing demands of travelers today by diversifying their existing portfolio to include extended stays and flexible inventory models. So far, hosts globally have shown their versatility and agility to adapt to the new normal, and we believe that long-term, we will come out stronger than ever before. Thank you, by the way, PriceLabs, for having us and everyone for joining today. And please don't hesitate to reach out to our marketing team and us all the time with any questions you may have. Stay safe and healthy.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Amiyat. So now we'll have Anurag start sharing his screen and going through PriceLabs and some of those different pricing strategies you can be setting. One question that we got here as you were presenting, and that comes up quite a bit, is about those guest agreements. And when you're transitioning to midterm stays and long-term stays, how do you keep guests as guests and make sure that they don't transition to being tenants? So I know a lot of the times in the US here, especially, when someone stays longer than 14 days or 30 days in certain markets, they become tenants and they have different legal protection in the legal system. And the worry is that once they're tenants, it's costly to evict them. It's difficult to make them leave your property if they do decide to overstay. So do Guesty's guest agreements help with that? Is there any wording that helps with property managers trying to avoid this problem here?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. And before I answer it, I have to admit I'm not a lawyer, and each one of you guys are in a different location, which have its own legal criteria. So please consult with your own legal advice first. Um, Only from our experience, I can assure you that a lot of our customers are implementing a lot of tools like signing these agreements upfront before stay with their guests. And those include the legal terminology that they need in their own locations. We do have our contract ability to be sent either automatically or manually to each guest. And this alone is helping a lot of them solve a lot of the issues around first of all the legal aspect of this, and second of all being afraid on about fraud or any type of risk to be rent to house parties or anything like that as well. So some people actually even use this feature for short term and not just for mid stays as well. I definitely encourage you to check our website. There is a button there that's called request a demo, and you can actually see a live demo of how these forms look like, what's the terminology. We do offer some templates there so you can use it off the bat and you don't have to use your own legal advice.
Perfect. Super helpful. And anecdotally, another question coming in, have you guys been seeing hosts complaining about any non-eviction clauses, guests trying to stay longer than their stay dates? I know on our end, we've definitely gotten complaints about house parties when people try to tackle those very short-term stays last minute, but anything about evictions on your end here?
So fortunately, we haven't had this experience with our customers yet. Someone here asked if Guesty have this feature of contracts automatically. So yes, we do. The way we work with launching new functionality is to always launch it to a select few and then to more and then to more until we spread it out. This way, we make sure that if there are any bugs, we iron them out before it reaches everyone. So please, if you are a Guesty customer and you aren't aware of that feature, you can ask customer support to open it up for you as a demo or as a beta tester for features that you don't necessarily see. As for the specific thing you asked about tenants evictions, again, I think that having legal contract signed help dramatically if cases do arise to and get to the point there police or legal system is involved. So I definitely encourage you guys to have some sort of protection in place. And it's better to think about this stuff before rather than deal with something later that potentially can cause you profit loss.
Perfect. And then Aaron, last question for you before we transition to Anurag here. With midterm stays, if people, extend those month over month, let's say a 1 month stay turns into a 6 month stay and they want to pay monthly versus a bulk sum right up front. Does Guesty offer that functionality? Is that something that you can set up?
Yeah, so it really depends which channel the reservation came from. Of course, if you made the reservation on Airbnb, Airbnb has that feature to pay monthly. For every channel, it's different. If you do get it on your own direct reservation, there is abilities in the system to set up different payment system. I'm not super involved in the needs and the bits of every aspect of the payment system and how much you can set it up, I believe we do have ability to charge monthly, and if not, to split a 6 month into monthly chunks too. It's also possible. As for extending reservation, it's actually a good idea to have automated messages go out in a mid-stay, asking guests if they plan to extend it upfront. Why? Because if you all of a sudden get like a reservation of 3 nights right in between, that kind of like ruins the ability to extend for a full month, that could be devastating sometimes. So I definitely encourage you guys to reach out as soon as possible, but not in the beginning, kind of like in the mid of the duration, with an automated message to let them know about their plans. And in many cases, they will let you know, oh, good that you ask. I'm actually planning to stay here another month. Thank you for reminding me. And then you can even extend like a special promotion for them, or potentially upsell of another cleaning. That's also possible.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Great. So that's all the kind of questions for now. Let's jump back into presentations, and then we'll kind of, anything else that comes in, we'll address it in the Q&A at the end here. So Anurag, do you want to take it away?
Sounds good. Thank you so much, guys. I do want to address a couple of things before I jump into my slides. One, I think there was another question on whether the slides that Amyat just showed, whether they'll be shared or not. And the answer to that is yes. So we'll be sharing these slides, and we'll be sharing the video as well. So if you're in the presentation already, you will still get the video. If you couldn't attend, you're not hearing this, but you'll still get it. And then the second thing, as I go through my presentation, we will talk about a few strategies. But we also want to run a few polls to understand who's already running some of these strategies, and get a better understanding of like how many people are already on it, how many people are going to try it, and things like that. Cool. So with that in mind, Amyat did a fantastic job of answering the why. So my presentation was midterm stays, the why and the how. And then I think Amyat really covered that part, the why part. I will still spend maybe 10% of my time showing some of the data and what we see. And then I really want to dive into how. And I want to answer the how from the perspective of different types of hosts and managers. So there are individual hosts, there are larger managers, there are managers who have apart hotels. So we want to think about what midterm stays mean in all of those different types of property management. So jumping into data a little bit to better answer the why. What you see here on the chart is for each month, what we are showing is how many stays happened in that month. So this is not the month of the booking, this is the month of the stay. So if you're in a ski market, generally the early part of the year would be high in Northern Hemisphere. If you're in a beach market, July and August would be high. This data is from all our customers globally. So it includes city markets, it includes Southern Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere, it includes ski markets, it includes beach markets. What I want to look more into, or what I want you guys to look more into this, is not the absolute numbers, which are already telling. You can see as COVID hit, the total number of stayed dates in each month in April, May, and June really dipped. And then they have been somewhat coming back, although we generally see July and August, at least in our properties, tend to be a lot higher than January and February. So they have not fully recovered yet. But what you'll see here is they're also being color coded by length of stay. So the part we want to highlight is in the darker color. Everything else is in the lighter color. 28+ day stays. Even in the lowest of low times, when COVID was at its peak, when number of stays had been cut in half, the number of extended stays actually increased, which might seem surprising, but it is actually not. We have seen this even previously, that during low demand periods, midterm stays or extended stays actually help you shore up. And I'm going to touch upon this as well. Like when there is low season in beach markets, what happens is a lot more folks come in, a lot more hosts are open to taking longer stays and end up filling some of their inventory using that instead of just being empty. There's also a fairly well-known phenomena in the US where a lot of southern states get demand that's called snowbird demand, which is folks from the northern countries, northern states, which are super cold, just moving temporarily to the southern states and using these short-term rentals, right? So COVID showed this, but this has been a phenomena even before. And to drill down that part a little bit, instead of looking at absolute number, I also want to look at what's the share of extended stays in each month this year. So you'll see that in January, 11% of the days that were occupied because of short-term, because of extended stays. That number really shot up to 25 and 28% in April and May, and is getting back down to 10%, 9% in the recent summer months. And you'll see for the future months, September, October, November, and December, it's looking pretty high right now, which could be two reasons. One is it's in a lot of locations, it's entering low season, but it's also probably because these months are still in the future. We generally see that people book longer stays farther out in the future. So that might be it. So as we get to December, it's possible that these numbers come down a bit. We want to see how much they come down. The other big thing you'll notice here, and Amia mentioned this as well, is lead times have really gone down. We are right at the end of August here, and usually in other years, September, October, November, December would have been looking much higher than what they do right now. Right now, September is way below August. As September finishes, we expect this to go up a lot higher. Like Amjad said, demand generally has been so last minute that we are still 6 days or 5 days away from September beginning. By the time September ends, this should be looking a lot stronger. Now, to really drive down how much the landscape has changed, what we did was we looked at the share of extended stays in 2019 as well. And what you'll see here is January and February held pretty steady. This is pre-COVID, Jan and Feb 2019, in the share of extended stay bookings looked very similar to Jan and Feb of 2020. And then as the pandemic hit, the numbers here really shot up. You will see that in spring it was 4%, 6%, generally 6%, whereas this year it has been 25% and almost touching 30% here. Even in the peak season, in some ways, in a lot of places, instead of 4 or 5%, it's been almost double the share of extended bookings. And again, it looks like there is a slight increase in fall, which could be that a lot of places are entering their low season, but this year it's been just a lot more. So again, we want to see if this will come down all the way or it will just stop somewhere in between. We'll get that data and we'll update that data as we get that right over the next few months. November actually stands out here. November generally is, if you look globally, November is a fairly low month. December, not so much because of Christmas and New Year. A lot of short-term travel happens, and we'll talk about a few strategies to address those things. November is generally, other than US Thanksgiving, very little happens in a lot of places. So generally we see a lot more extended stays, which happened last year as well. It's nothing new this year in some ways. Now, with all of that in mind, knowing that extended stays have been increasing this year, what we really want to address is, should you start thinking about midterm bookings? And we don't want to put everybody in the situation of, yes, you should. We want to be a little more strategic about this question. The questions you want to ask yourself are, what have your properties been doing? If you're in one of those markets that have rebounded extremely well this summer, and you're getting booked, and you're because if schools are off, your summer stays are extending into fall, maybe you don't need those long-term bookings. You're already getting higher priced short-term bookings. You don't need to. But if you're not, even if you're running slightly lower occupancy than normal, or even if you're 80% booked, you might want to think about, okay, can you get something out of it? And we'll go into what those questions or the details of those questions should be. The second is, if you want to spend some energy doing this, you should also figure out, if you aren't getting long-term bookings or extended stays, are you in a market that is getting those stays? So we will help answer that question here as well, to figure out if if you're in a market that has a ton of extended stays happening and you have not been getting them, then the answer is somewhat obvious to you, right? Like that yeah, maybe it makes sense to spend that energy. Versus if you have not been getting and your market hasn't been getting either, then why spend the time? The next thing that you have to ask yourself in some ways personally is weigh up all those pros and cons of midterm stays or extended stays. And Amya touched upon this already. The pros of extended stays are that there are fewer operational costs. You're not in a lot of locations, you have to physically be present for a check-in, especially in Europe, versus if you have an extended stay, you're not doing this every few days. There's lower wear and tear on your house because there is a single occupant rather than many different parties who are all trying to figure out what each switch does every 3 days. Also, if somebody is staying for an extended stay, there is probably a lower chance of wear and tear of house parties as well. The last one, from a pure revenue perspective, is risk, right? So if you get an extended stay, that is reducing your risk in the sense that if you get a long booking and the booking has already started, you in some ways are guaranteed a certain minimum revenue. Whereas if you get a ton of shorter bookings instead, there is a chance that something happens and the folks who are going to come end up canceling. So we talked about how cancellation rates are through the roof in some ways. So think about that perspective. There is a flip side to it in the con section here. If you take an extended stay now, if the demand in your area does bounce back without you anticipating it, you don't have an out in some ways. You can't suddenly switch over to say, hey, demand is back, let me open up my short-term rental. You can't, because you have a long-term stay. And then the second one, which I guess we have already had plenty of discussion about, is making sure that you're covered from a contracts and legal perspective, that midterm and extended stays can require and do require slightly different contracts to make sure you're compliant, and if anything happens, that you have some recourse. So think about all of those things and figure out if you want to get into this. We will try to answer these questions of what's happening in your property and how do you make decisions based on that, and what's happening in your market. And then we'll cover 3 main strategies that we have outlined. If you have questions about these strategies, feel free to ask them. If you have strategies that you use, go ahead and tell us about them. We would love to hear more about like what people have been doing. There's so many creative things that can be done here that nobody is going to fully cover every single aspect of, like, hey, in my market, this really works. Cool. So let's go into what's happening in your property or properties. First up, if you're an individual host that has one property, that's either your own second home or your own home, which you sometimes put on short-term rentals, then you have sort of you can fall into 2 brackets. You have either never taken midterm bookings, in which case this is completely new to you. So there will be learning curve in figuring out what the local regulations are, what kind of market you are in. If you are not getting long-term bookings, do others in your market get long-term bookings? And then also thinking through some calculations before you get a long-term booking. You should make sure that the rates are set up so that financially it would make sense to get those long-term bookings. So we'll cover both of those topics, the market research and those calculations. If you have been getting midterm bookings, so you're already an experienced hand at this, then great. What we discuss here is still going to be useful, but you have the additional benefit of having some experience with longer bookings and some data that you can fall back on to say, yeah, this is what works in my market or in my properties, and this is what doesn't. The second segment is traditional property management companies, where you manage somebody else's home, and not one home, but many homes, right? And this could be somebody else's second home or somebody else's single home that's vacant right now in some ways, right? If that's the case, everything we said for individual hosts still applies. Like, you still have to think about those things, but you do have some more data to fall back on. Like, if you're managing multiple listings, you might have run across a midterm booking and seen how much easier it might be to manage, or what kind of revenue benefits come, or maybe the revenue benefits don't come. I mean, you have some more data to fall back on. And again, we'll cover some of these strategies of, like, okay, in low demand periods, if you're managing multiple properties, what kind of things can you do? And lastly, once you have taken these extended stays, what do you do? This is the flexible inventory part. What do you do with the days around it? If you got 2 bookings that are both extended stays, but there are, say, 7 days sitting in between, what do you do with those 7 days? Or if you have one extended booking, should you do something about the nights that are right next to that extended booking? So we'll cover all of that. The last section, or last sort of kind of property manager, could be a serviced apartment or an apart hotel, where each unit that is managed doesn't have its own separate owner. There is one single sort of entity that owns all these homes. In the big difference here is, in such a case, you care more about the total revenue from all the units than the individual revenue for each unit. And that's important because if you're in traditional management, you have to sort of satisfy every single owner. Whereas in serviced apartments or apart hotels, you can say, I don't care if one unit is always sitting empty. If my revenue from the rest of it is really doing well, I'm willing to have that trade-off. That whoever is getting the revenue from these properties doesn't care about the split between units in some ways. You also get some benefit, and we'll talk about this. You get some benefit from being able to experiment a little bit and trying strategies where you might have some units sitting empty, but then overall your portfolio does well. And we'll go into those as well. Cool. So the second question we want to answer is your market. So suppose you have taken midterm bookings or extended stays, or you have not taken extended stays. How do you even go about finding what's common in your market? A few months back, we rolled out market dashboards, what we call market dashboards, and these are free till September 30th. So if you have an account, go to the market dashboards page, and you'll see, if you have not already been using them, you'll see 5 free credits left, and you can create dashboards where you can enter an address and a radius, and it'll show very localized data for that area. If you don't have an account, still go ahead, create an account. You don't have to add any payment method or anything. Just head over to market dashboards, and every account gets 5 free reports. And before, like I said, does not need any payment method. So go ahead and go crazy with these. But once you create those reports, the kind of data that you'll see that will help answering these questions is going to look like this. And I've pulled out a couple of examples. The first one, I'm looking at Barcelona, which right now is running at about 30% occupancy, which is much lower than what Barcelona really usually does during summer. Summer is pretty big in Barcelona. And what we are seeing is that about 1/5 of that occupancy is coming from extended stays. So what you're looking here is a stay date on the x-axis, and the color coding is green is 30+ night stays, 14 to 30 is purple, and then short-term stays are the remaining colors. You'll see that out of 1,000 listings that we are looking at, in the last 30 days, for tonight, the bookings that have, the stays that are happening, about 1/5 of those are coming from these extended stays. The other interesting thing that's happening in Barcelona and many other urban markets is the lead time. So you'll be able to see this as well. A ton of bookings are happening within the last 2 days, and a few more in the last couple of weeks. So if you look at the next 14 days, that's when a lot of the bookings are happening, and comparatively not as much farther out. Now, this seems like a market where some midterm strategies would be useful. Now, I want to look at another market, which is Galveston, which is, if you don't know Galveston, it's a very small beach town in Texas on the Gulf Coast. And it's running weekends at 75% and midweek at 45%. And it's very easy to see why in these charts. Like, it's primarily driven by short stays. So a ton of short stays happening here on the weekends, not as much activity during midweek. And then that green is virtually absent here. So if you're in Galveston and if you're thinking, hey, it'll take me, should I go ahead and start trying for extended stays? You might want to really think about, okay, is there enough in this market to start trying something on that front? Also important is the lead time chart. You'll see how this one differs from Barcelona, where Barcelona being a city, a ton of people are booking super last minute only when they need to, versus in Galveston, folks are booking. Like the biggest segment here is 15 to 30 days out. So generally, Galveston is pretty close to Houston, I think about an hour's drive or something. So a lot of folks from Houston would plan their weekend getaway in Galveston and markets like this. So this is an example of a market where maybe midterm is not such a good idea. So before you go gung-ho and say, okay, I need to do this, go research your market, and don't just look at our dashboards, look at as many data sources you can find. Also go and ask if you have local forums or Facebook groups of hosts, ask in those groups. As many data points you can get about these answers about what your market is doing, the better it goes. Now, sorry. The next thing we now want to get into is strategies. So, and this is one of the questions that has been coming up fairly often on our support, and that's how do you go about figuring out what monthly discounts should we set? So one of the things we have found is if you look at the market data, and these reports, you'll also find answers to that of how other property managers or other hosts are doing. About half of the managers or half of the homes don't have any monthly discounts. And even those that have sometimes have very small ones. Which is in itself not bad. If you're running fully booked, as this example, I'll go into this example as this will show. If you're running fairly well booked, it doesn't make sense to give a big discount. So suppose you're 80% booked. Suppose you're priced, and this is all hypothetical example, but suppose you're priced at on average $100 a night, and based on your recent history, you're expecting to go about 80% booked in the next month. Now, the expected revenue in that case that you would look at is $100 is your average nightly rate. There are 30 days in a month, and you're expecting to be 80% booked. You multiply all of this, and it comes to $2,400. Now, suppose you gave a 20% discount on your for monthly stays or stays that are at least 28 or 30 days long, and you get a 30-night-long booking. Now, instead of getting $100, you're going to get $80 a night because you gave a discount. And then there are 30 days in a month, but because it's a 1 month long booking, all the 30 days are going to be booked. So you end up making about exactly the same amount here in this case, right? So if you're in such a situation, it does not make sense from a pure financial perspective to give a discount of more than 20%. It still might make sense to give a 20% or higher discount if you value the operational ease or the lower risk a little bit. If you don't value those things at all and you're purely revenue driven, you would say these two are about the same. So your monthly discount should be something lower to say, hey, if I get a monthly booking, let me make a little bit more in some ways. Now compare that to a market where your market or your own portfolio where you're running 50% right now. So you're priced at $100, you're running 50% occupancy or expecting 50% occupancy. You would expect to make 100 times 30 times 50%, which is $1,500. Now in this case, if you gave a steep 40% monthly discount, what would happen is instead of $100, you would get $60 a night, but then all your 30 days are booked, which means you'll end up making $1,800. So if your portfolio is running a low occupancy, then getting these monthly stays, even at a steep discount, might actually be financially beneficial in addition to being operationally easy, right? So do look into your own properties and see what's happening there. If you're managing multiple properties, look through, are there properties that are doing really well versus are there properties that are not doing so well? And the ones that are not doing so well, see if you can bump up the monthly discounts and stuff like that to get more of those bookings. Now, I do want to add a few sort of things to be careful about when doing something like that. One is, in this example, everywhere we have assumed that the average nightly rate is at about $100. Suppose you're running 50% occupancy and you did this 40% discount, and for a few days, nothing happens, right? You don't get bookings, and you're like, okay, let me lower my rates because I don't seem to be getting anything. In that case, you might need to redo all of this calculation, because if you lower your rate from 100 to 80, now all of these calculations will need to be done with that with the new numbers. Also, if you go from 100 to 80, this 50% expectation might not be true anymore. You might end up getting more occupancy to where depending on how much you lower your price, you might go from 50 to 80, in which case this much of a discount really doesn't make sense. So keep that in mind. If you're making these calculations and giving steep discounts, when you lower your rates for the short-term rentals, then also lower your monthly discounts, at least temporarily, to see what the side effects are. The other thing to be very careful about is many platforms don't allow a different monthly discount each month. So if you give a steep 40% discount, and if you're in a seasonal market where people are already booking for next summer, what you don't want to happen is somebody to book entire August of 2021 at a 40% discount, whereas you were fairly confident. It's hard to be confident right now, but nobody knows the answer of how booked you will be next August. So you don't want to be giving a steep 40% discount when you sort of expect that, yeah, you will get fully occupied because August is my high season and it gets fully occupied every single time and things like that. So be careful about those things. There are a few things you can do. If the platform allows you to do different monthly discounts each month, then sure, use that. Only do it for the next few months. Or you can also use maximum LOS settings. So if you have a monthly discount of 40% for your high season, don't allow longer stays by having a max LOS of, say, 14 nights or something like that, in which case nobody can book that long stay. So cool. At this point, I do want to stop. And Oliver, if you want to run that poll, I do want to get a sense of what kind of discounts everybody who's listening here has been putting in. And Oliver, I'm assuming you'll run this poll. Cool. All right.
Yeah, poll should be up now.
Sounds good. Yeah. Go ahead and put in the results, and we'll share these results towards the end as well. As you do that, and I'll give you guys a couple of minutes. The next topic we want to delve into is...
Rob, do you want to quickly take questions that are around monthly stay?
Absolutely.
The strategy?
Yeah, especially because we have only 7 minutes left.
Yeah, one is quick average percentage discount for a monthly rental, 3 months, 6 months.
Say that again.
What's an average percentage discount for a monthly rental versus a 3-month rental versus a 6-month rental?
Got it. So the answer here is very dependent on what market you are in, what your market and your portfolios are experiencing right now. Generally, the longer it is, the less risk you get from your revenue, on your revenue. So if you take a 6-month booking, you're guaranteed a minimum revenue, right? So people generally have a trade-off for that, and that trade-off would be very dependent on each person. It's hard to come up with a number for that will work for every scenario and every market, but generally people progressively increase those discounts. This entire section was actually about trying to figure out what that discount should be in your portfolio. So again, like look at what occupancy you've been running at, what occupancy you expect. So if you're in a market where you're heading into low season, it might make sense to give a deeper discount for 6-month stays so that your low season gets booked instead of trying to scamper and get shorter bookings last minute and things like that.
Got it. I'm not sure. There's one question. So are you not scraping data from Airbnb/booking.com? The answer to that is we are. Yeah. So
yeah.
Yeah.
These sections were about that stuff. So we are looking at, you can order these reports for pretty much any area in the world, and you'll see data about what kind of length of stay patterns exist there.
Got it. There is one more question, Rob, but you can jump to the next strategy, and then we'll
Sounds
come back
good.
to it.
Yeah. So the next strategy is actually looking at your length of stay settings. Now, most managers tend to have a minimum length of stay of 3 nights or 4 nights or 2 nights or 1 night, and sort of leave it open to whoever wants to book can book. And this is done a lot of times for operational reasons. One of the strategies a lot of PriceLabs users use, and I've heard of really good results from that, is stopping people from booking long stays far out. Short stays far out. Did the complete opposite of what it should be. So what you're trying to do here is, if you think that these extended stays are going to be beneficial, the math works out. And if you're in a market like Barcelona, where if you look at this distribution, outside of a month from now, most of the stays that are booked are coming from longer stays. Very, very few are coming from shorter stays. What you can do is, what you want to avoid is to have a booking that's 2 night long in September end, because then nobody can book an extended stay on your booking. What a lot of folks do is, outside of 30 days, they will put in a minimum LOS of 14 nights. So the answer, this is specific to a certain part of Barcelona. Each property manager, each location, each portfolio should have a different answer. They should look at their own data. But you could do something like, outside of 30 days, go with 14 nights or more. Let's try to get these extended stays. And within 30 nights, you can start taking shorter bookings. So what you're doing is trying to fill up your calendar with these extended stays, and whatever's left, then you go in and say, okay, I will take a shorter booking here, because anyways, these shorter bookings are very last minute. I'm not really cutting them off or cutting too many of them off by not offering them far out. So that way you try and get the best of both worlds. The thing that you want to be careful there with is, this is again Barcelona. There are times or events where there will be a surge in short-term bookings even far out. So this is, in the last 30 days, a few people have already started booking for Christmas and New Year's. I think this is Mobile World Congress. I actually don't know which event this is, but there are these pockets here where you can already see shorter stays happening. What you can go in and do is, you can have a general rule that says only get long bookings far out, but you can select specific events and say, for these events, I'm okay taking short stays because I know they are real big revenue drivers in my area. And for these events, nobody's going to come for a month. They want to come, and people do book early enough. So you can go ahead and allow short stays for specific dates while still maintaining the strategy of not allowing, in general, longer short stays far out. The third strategy that I want to talk about, and this is this goes in, this is an option some of our folks use, but not everyone, partly because we haven't rolled it out for everyone. But if you would be interested, do reach out to our support, and we can enable this for your account. Most folks already do something about orphan night pricing and orphan night minimum stays, and orphan nights is what I'm trying to show here in red. So these are, the grays here are bookings, and then between two bookings, if you have short gaps, these are what we would call orphan gaps. There is also something called adjacent days, where if you have a booking, the days right next to it, even though they are not a gap, you could do something here. So what you don't want is somebody to book a stay starting the 16th year and onwards, so that it leaves these 2 days empty. What you can try, you can't, somebody who wants to start on this Wednesday, you can't make them change their mind and come earlier. What you can do is try and incentivize people to book these days. So it might not be the same guest, maybe, but some other guest who's trying to evaluate between your property and somebody else's property, to say, hey, if I book these days, I'm getting a little bit of a cheaper price on this property. Let me book this one instead. And it tries to minimize the number of gaps, or tries to reduce the number of gaps you might see in your calendar. Especially if you have, if you're taking extended stays, what you don't want is a booking every 14 days, which makes sure that now you don't have enough left on your calendar to take any more extended stays, and you have to solely rely on shorter stays. So if you have a booking, if you can get people to book days right next to it, you are sort of making sure every day can be booked with a longer stay, and then that way stay a lot more booked than usual. Now, again, there are plenty of caveats here. What you don't want is people to only book adjacent days and on an ongoing basis keep giving those discounts. So if you want to see how that strategy works in your area, in your portfolio, and whether it's helping or not, if you are an apart hotel or a serviced apartment, one of the things that you have the flexibility to do is, in this example where there are two short gaps, if this apartment was identical to the apartment below, you could move this booking to the apartment below, and you can offer a little bit of an upgrade, maybe add something a little extra in there. That way it opens up this listing to take a long booking, and it only leaves a 1 night gap here. So now you have a good chunk of calendar left here and a chunk of calendar 7 days left here, to not 7, 8 days, or I'm getting my math wrong. It's 9 days that you can take a longer booking there. So a lot more sort of a lot more flexibility if you're into that model where you're a guest house or a serviced apartment or an apart hotel. Cool. So that was the extent of what I wanted to cover. One of the things I did want to say was a lot of the strategies that we covered, the dynamic minimum stay, the adjacent day discounts, these can be automated in PriceLabs, but if you don't use PriceLabs, they can still be done manually. Like if you don't want to use dynamic pricing for whatever reason, you can still go in and look at your calendar. If you're using Guesty, look at the multi-calendar, spot these things and make adjustments directly in there. Like none of these can be made easier with automation, but that doesn't mean these can't be done without automation. Go ahead and do these. There are a few more resources that I wanted to point out. One is we have a blog. A lot of the strategies we talked about are already up there, so you can go visit that as well. And then market dashboards, again, like I said, 5 free dashboards till September 30th. You will not get charged unless you opt in after September 30th, so they are truly risk-free in some ways. And then if you have any questions or any feedback, like this is such a broad topic and this is such a new topic that nobody knows every single answer. There are things we are learning every single day. So feel free to reach out to us with feedback. Feel free to send your questions our way and you'll learn something and we'll learn something. Cool. That was my bit. I guess there must be questions.
There must be questions. So we just hit that hour mark here.
Okay.
I know having that kind of Q&A in the middle made things run a little longer. So maybe let's do 5 quick minutes of questions if possible. Do we have time for that?
I'm open, Amjad.
Yeah, sure.
Alrighty, perfect. So first off, we do have those poll results. I'm sharing those now. So it looks like most people on the webinar here already using monthly discounts. However, most of those monthly discounts in that sort of 10 to 20% range. So as Anurag was saying with those rule of thumbs, that would kind of correlate with your occupancy expectation to be right around 80 to 90%. So something to think about if you are trending with lower occupancies, potentially, yeah, think about making more aggressive month-long stays to kind of de-risk your portfolio here a little bit. Perfect. I'm jumping into some questions. So we had a few questions revolving around incorporating your short-term stays with these midterm stay strategies. So a lot of users are asking, what's the best way to think about your base price within PriceLabs when you are targeting long-term stays with the idea that there will be short-term stays in between those longer bookings here? Any thoughts there, Anurag?
Right. So from that perspective, what we generally say is the base price should be catered towards shorter stays. So think about the base price and your nightly prices purely from how you stand with your competition, how you've been performing against the competition, or how you've been performing overall. Like if you have a base price of $100 and you're 30% occupied, maybe it's time to lower that base rate a little bit. Or even if you have your minimum price set to $80, it's possible that all your prices sit at those $80, especially in low demand periods. Maybe lower that $80 a little bit more if you can afford to, of course. Like if it doesn't make if it doesn't make sense to go lower than $80, then you can't do much about it. So think of nightly rates and base rates purely from a short-term perspective, and then use the discounts on top of that to figure out what your monthly situation should look like. It would be very hard to start mixing the two to say my base rates and minimum rates are for the monthly stays, and then I will somehow back calculate the nightly rates for shorter stays from there.
Perfect. Yeah, no, great explanation. I was thinking the same here. Awesome. Next question. So a lot of users are, of course, dropping their rates currently to try to get whatever demand they can, especially if they aren't in their high season right now, or if they're leaving their high season. The question is, what can be done to protect your far out rate? So if you're dropping your prices now, who knows if the pandemic might end, events start getting scheduled, maybe people start booking the next high season. What can you do within PriceLabs to kind of protect those here?
So there are a few different ways. One is if you want to drop your rates for the upcoming 2 months or a few months, the recommended way is not by reducing your base price, because the base price does impact your entire year. What you can do is instead use date override. So you can select from today until end of October or end of September and say, drop the rates for these dates by 20% or drop the minimum price by 20% only for those dates, instead of dropping the minimum price and the base price for the rest of the calendar as well. And these can be done either for each property, or if you want to save time, you can do these kinds of things at a group level or account level. So if you have multiple properties in multiple cities, you can target all properties in one city with one click and say, drop rates for the next month by this much. The even easier way would be to use what we have called occupancy adjustments, where based on how occupied you are in the coming week, month, 2 months, or at a portfolio level instead of property level, we can automatically bump your rates up or down. So the other way would be to do that, to have rolling windows and set your own discounting scheme. We have some defaults there already. One of the profiles is called coronavirus, but you can build your own profile and say automatically drop rates or increase rates based on how occupied I am, instead of dropping it for the entire horizon. So this will only do for the next month, 2 months, and you can choose how far out you want these to go.
Perfect. And I definitely don't want this webinar to run too long, so let's maybe put an end to questions here. Last question that we have received a couple times here is, how do we start working with PriceLabs? And I can address that one. So if you just head over to PriceLabs.co, there is a start your free trial button in the top right-hand corner. That'll let you access both the system and those market dashboards that Anurag was showing here earlier today for free for 30 days. So do feel free to start that. And if you do have any questions about getting started, always feel free to shoot us an email at support@pricelabs.co, and we'll make sure to get you answers there. Otherwise, with Guesty, I believe the email is marketing@guesty.com. Is that correct, Amiyad?
Correct. Or you can just go to our website and click the button there to request a demo.
Perfect.
Obviously, PriceLab is completely integrated with Guesty solution, and even simplify some of the channels pushes of prices. I saw some of the questions were around specific channels. So if you are working with Guesty and PriceLabs, all of this already integrated.
Yeah, that's the important part on distribution side, right? So the way it usually works, if somebody is completely uninitiated, you set up rules and you review prices in our platform. And once you're done, you can turn on a switch to say, hey, I'm comfortable with this. The minimum night restrictions, which are dynamic, and the prices, which you control and are dynamic, will go to Guesty, and Guesty will then publish them, I think, to all the channels they are directly connected with, which is a fair number of the larger channels. And then I guess Amit mentioned through Rentals United, it can also go to some of these websites that cater specifically to midterm stays.
Perfect. And we'll be sending a lot of this information and more, recording all the slideshows in this follow-up email. So expect to see that in your inbox in a few hours. Otherwise, everyone, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you found that helpful. If you do have any feedback on what has been working for you, any other questions, do send those over. And yeah, we'd be happy to give you a more personalized response here when we do have a little more time. But thank you so much for joining, and have a great rest of your week here. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much, guys.